Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. This week's setlist curator is Kevin from the YouTube show Wook Plus. On the program, Kevin and his co-hosts go live after Fish and Dead & Company performances, no matter what hour of the night, with in-depth analysis, setlist recaps, and tons of banter in between. They also do interviews and recently streamed a live performance of LA jam band Taper's Choice. All of the Wook Plus links are in the show notes. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, how are we doing tonight?
This week's prize pack provider is Relix, which just introduced apparel and stickers like no other, the Taper's Section collection. Dive into the nostalgia of legendary venues through Relix's exclusive designs of bootleg cassette tapes. From Fillmore East to Red Rocks to the iconic Barton Hall and the historic festivals like Summer Jam 73 and Woodstock 69, each design is a testament to the unforgettable performances that have shaped our musical landscape. You can go to relixmarketplace.com to own a tangible slice of musical history with Relix's uniquely crafted apparel and sticker collection featuring all of your favorite bootleg cassettes. Supplies is limited, so check it out before it's gone. All right, here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year their performance is from. Contestants who are all on a video conference together can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. Whoever is furthest from the correct year is eliminated. The last two deadheads standing will hear 3 tracks, and whoever is closest to the correct years in aggregate wins. We've got our 3-time defending champ Gavin here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the deadheads in a moment. But first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead. The guesses are in. It was a Mind Left Body jam at Rosemont Horizon in Rosemont, Illinois on March 10th, 1993. Kevin, awesome pick. Tell us about it.
I just love the piece of music. It was something I discovered, getting tapes. It would pop up on like 74 tapes. For years, I searched for this album called the Chrome Nun by Paul Kantner that apparently the song came from, the whole Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra thing. And the song on the album sounds nothing like the piece of music, but it's a beautiful piece of music. And it was special when they went into it because it was a rare one.
That was a great pick. The two closest were Gavin and Edward, and they're both on in the next round. They both guessed 92. We'll go to our 3-time defending champ going for 4. Gavin is 48 from Las Vegas by way of Chicago. Gavin, 1 year south of 93. Really nice poll. Why 92?
I thought it was 93 at first. With the keys, I knew it was Vince in there, and so it was a pretty limited window what it could be. So I kind of thought 93, but playing the game, I said 92 and got lucky.
What was the sound of Vince's keys that you were able to pull out?
It's not so much that it was Vince's keys, that it wasn't Brent.
Really nice, Gavin. Edward is 19 from San Antonio. He also guessed 92. Nice poll.
To me, it sounded the spaciness that you'd get in early 90s, like especially like Brent's last tour going into the first couple tours with summer tours with Vince were really spacey. And there was a little bit of Vince in there, which you could hear a little bit at the beginning. And if you pay enough attention, Bob Weir's tone is different like every tour, right? Or every year at least. So that definitely set the sights for 91 and 93. What tripped me up 92 versus like 93 or 94 or anything is Jerry Garcia's tone. After he started picking up the lightning bolt guitar his tone sort of sounded like pseudo acoustic with the electronics he'd put on it, and really not as crisp as, you know, Rosebud or Tiger would sound. The 92 recording definitely had the Rosebud sound to me, so that's what I was leaning towards.
Nicely done. So we have two Pauls tonight. Paul S guessed 83 and Paul K guessed 78. So Paul S is on to the next round. Why 83?
Man, Kevin, what a pick, bro. No vocals killed me right out of the gate. And then it was hard to hear keys for me, honestly. Like I was just kind of like a jamming. I'm going off Jerry. I hear Bob in there. And then I hear two drummers. I'm like, all right, cool. Boom. The clarity of the recording, I was like, all right, well, we're out of the 70s, definitely. Right. And then I don't know, man. I knew it wasn't 70s. And I didn't think it was that late. I didn't think it was 93 at all.
Right on. And I should say Paul is 38 from New Jersey. Paul K is 54 from Lafayette, Colorado. Paul, 78.
I don't know where I was going with that. I mean, great pick, Kevin. Great pick. I agree with that. I just didn't have much of a context. I was thinking it was kind of along the lines of like a Close Encounters. I knew it wasn't the 80s, but I think before I came on this show, I've been a longtime listener, and I knew that the first song was going to be from after Brent died, which is when I kind of checked out. And I should have just guessed somewhere in the 90s, because I had a recurring nightmare that first song was going to be from the 90s, the late night or the early 90s, and I just was going to not have any context of it. So that's pretty much what happened. Sometimes, you know, that's the way it goes. Maybe I manifested it that way. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a real premonition, because this almost never happens. So
I should have just gone with, it would have been like 92, 93, because I'm like, well, that doesn't sound too familiar. So,
well, thanks for being a longtime listener. So happy to have you here. How did you get into the Dead?
Yeah, I grew up in Maine, which had a really unique and thriving Grateful Dead culture. You know, they played there in the 80s. They pretty much every year they played in Maine. So I've been listening to the Grateful Dead for 40 years, which is amazing, you know, and it's such a great musical foundation. Kind of comes in waves and it comes and goes. But listening to your show, I was like, there's a whole different way of listening to the Grateful Dead, which I really appreciate. I have a very like ear for it, but I'm not a musician, so I can't pick out the tones like Gavin is very good at that. And you know, to hear the way that people can interpret the same music has been really great. So thanks for doing what you do.
Thanks, Paul. It's such a great compliment. Appreciate it. What type of venues did the Dead play in Maine? Because I'm imagining very Maine-esque venues.
Yeah, they played at the Cumberland County Civic Center, which was about 7,000. They did this outdoor show in Lewiston in 1980, which is really one of my favorite outdoor festival recordings. They played like three and a half hours almost, and just a great show from 1980. They played at the Augusta Civic Center, which was a little bit smaller than Portland. I think it was about 6,000, 5,000. And then they played Oxford. They played this outdoor show at Oxford in 1988. They always played great shows in Maine. I think they did the second Box of Rain breakout after Hampton there at Cumberland. So they always played great shows. I think they really enjoyed being up there. And I think people traveled up there, but less people made the trip up there. And then there was always a great time for people from Maine.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Was it mostly Mainers, or was it the traveling circus that shut you guys out?
No, I think it was a pretty good mix. I mean, like I said, Maine had a really quite a strong Grateful Dead culture. I think I've lived a lot of places where you kind of go to what's there too. So, you know, in Maine, we got a lot of heavy metal. We got Judas Priest, and we had Aerosmith coming up there, Jay Giles. Like the people that made it to Maine, it wasn't everyone. A lot of people stopped in Boston, but I think people traveled up to Maine to go see the shows. But then I think there was room for people who lived in Maine to go too, and it was definitely more a part of the culture than a lot of other places, I think.
Paul, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, hope I get another chance sometime, Mike. Something in the 70 to 90 range would be awesome.
Thanks, Paul. Paul S. and Edward and Gavin are on in the next round. Kevin has another great pick. The guesses are in. Caution, Do Not Stop on the Tracks at Fillmore East in New York City on September 20th, 1970. Kev, tell us about that one.
I love Caution. Have you ever heard the story of why they wrote Caution? They were on a train going to Vancouver, and Jerry was sticking his head out in between the cars and almost fell out of the train, and Bob grabbed him just as another train went by the other way. And afterwards, they wrote Caution, and the guitar lick's supposed to be Jerry's imitation of a train.
So Jerry wasn't 100% sober, you're saying?
Probably not. Probably not. But I just love Caution. It's such a fantastic thing. 72 in Europe, it made a comeback. I guess Pig was, it was his last stand, so to speak. And then from like 74, it showed up twice, then 78 once. And they would come back to it occasionally. But I really feels like it's something that would have been great out of space, like another other one alternative or something,
So you think it would have worked later on in the run too?
Yeah, I think it could have been an 80s classic. I think it would have made some great shirts.
Nice pick. Paul and Edward guessed 68, and they were 2 years off. And our three-time defending champ Gavin guessed 73. He was 3 years off. We'll catch up with them in a second. But first, Edward, you're on to the finals. Tell us about 68.
Well, this is a difficult one. Huge props, Kevin. Seriously. They definitely had the Gibson SG tone that you hear in the 60s to me, and my absolute favorite, Caution, from Valentine's Day 68. That sounded a lot like that to me. So that's sort of where I base my answer off of.
Really nicely done, Edward. You're on to the finals. As is Paul, 68 as well.
And again, no Vokes, Kev. Brutal, hard. But no, man, you could just tell it's real early on, but it's not like 65. It's not that like rock and roll Beatles style music. I play this game in my car when I drive around whenever shows come out, and like going into this, I told myself, listen, every time you think of it a year, just go with it, because every time I don't trust my gut, I get it wrong. So I just went with my gut.
Good strategy. Gavin, 73.
Yeah. So I did not catch that it was even Caution. The Caution jams that I mean, I know Caution and I know the song. I just didn't catch the snippet of it there. And I thought when they brought the Caution jams back in 79, those are the ones I'm more familiar with. And so I thought it was just some long ass jam, like out of either like a Plane or a Dark Star or something like that. And so you could see that I just totally missed it. That is pretty simple there.
It's been such a good time chatting with you, Gavin.
Thank you. No, it's been so much fun. It's definitely brought the anxiety out a little bit, but it's worth it. It's a great thing. The prizes that I've been getting have been a lot of fun, and it's time to pass the torch, right?
Well, you'll be vying for the torch again in the Tournament of Champions this summer.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, Gavin. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck, guys.
Before we go on to the finals, Edward, I'm wondering how you got into the Dead.
Mine, compared to other people I've spoken with, is a bit extraordinary, I think. So the Dead, at the risk of sounding cliche, I've been into them my whole life. When I was real little, like just out the womb, my dad would sing to my twin brother and I, Terrapin Station, right? And, I vividly remember him singing Counting Stars by Candlelight. We had like this little turtle nightlight that projected stars onto the ceiling. And about the time I was born, the Dead put out a CD, Trucking Up to Buffalo, July 4th, 1989. And, he bought the CD and we'd rent the DVD from Blockbuster. And, we danced to songs like, US Blues, Touch of Grey, Not Fade Away, Bertha, and Terrapin Station, of course. From then up until about the time I was in middle school, the Dead were sort of just a part of my life. When I was old enough to get an MP3 player, my dad preloaded like Touch of Grey, Ripple, Sugar Magnolia on there. And the summer going into my 7th grade year, the Dead put out Sunshine Daydream, the Oregon Creamery one. And it went to my public library. My dad says, "Hey, can you go pick it up for me? I want to check it out." And when he was done listening to it, I got bored and I started just looking through the set list on the back, seeing if I knew any of the songs. And the only one I recognized was Sugar Magnolia off of disc 3. And, I popped the disc into my little stereo and, switched it to, I think it was track 6, and just boom, that did it for me. As a musician of myself, it's just what the Dead did was just tremendous. And the next 2 months were just a roller coaster of me like absorbing as much of the Dead as possible. And then he bought us Dead and Company tickets very soon after that. We saw him in Dallas, December of that year, 2017. And that's how it started.
Well, what's your instrument?
I am a tuba player and I play the trombone in a jazz band.
Do you ever play tuba or trombone along to Dead tracks and kind of like supplement it like a Branford Marsalis-esque?
Actually, funny story. Bob Weir and the Wolf Bros came through Austin about last year. And, they have that little 5-piece band with them, the Wolfpack. And I got in touch with Adam Thies, who's their trombone player. And we spoke on the phone for a while. And after that, I would take, old Wolf Bros recordings where it's, just the trio. And I'd play trombone with them, sort of like with what the Wolfpack was doing. And I use them as a backing track sometimes.
That's awesome. How do you decide when to play and when not to play when you're adding a trombone to, like, say, let's go back to Terrapin Station, this song your dad sang? Like, when do you decide when to chime in?
It's about not interrupting, whoever's singing. It's about sort of building a frame around it. So, like, consider the bum 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 bum, that part of it. There's playing along with that, or maybe like adding a little bit of like just embellishing to it so that it sounds sort of sweet, like what Branford Marsalis would do.
The Wolf Bros have charts. Somebody sat down and actually, I think, wrote down, I guess, the basic song parts. And definitely when they played with the National Symphony,
Yeah.
they had to have somebody come in and do that.
Yeah, that's like Bob Weir has been talking about that for years. Like I remember an interview from around the time of Fare Thee Well, where he was saying like, "Oh yeah, I got this orchestra thing in the works," and lo and behold, we're what 7-8 years later, and they're doing it now.
And Trey just announced a symphony show as well. What is it about these musicians? Why do you think they want to play with orchestras?
I think it's sort of not necessarily an ego thing, but it's about cementing themselves with the classics. Because you hear a lot about, the Romantic era composers like Mozart, Beethoven, into like classical era stuff, but you don't hear much like past the 1800s. You don't hear people like Ellington or Coltrane mentioned in the same breadth as them. So this is perhaps like Bobby and Trey's way of getting up there with like the huge classical composers. Or perhaps it's even a way of just giving it new life. Like the Dead, they've been around for nearly 60 years now, and they have to not have to constantly reinvent themselves, but the music lends itself to that constant reinvention. Like you have, Dead and Company doing it with John Mayer's bluesy guitar, Bob Weir doing it with the sort of Bakersfield sound, jazzy sound too, and then adding it to a symphony orchestra. That's just another level of interpretation of the music.
Kev, your show Wook Plus is even more Fish-centric than Grateful Dead-centric. Do you have a take on why Bobby and recently Trey have decided to play with orchestras?
Well, I guess Trey has always leaned, you'd think, more towards that, due to his love of Genesis and the prog rock and that, composed, written out stuff. And some stuff like Petrichor, which I'm going to walk out of a Fish show if they play, fits with the National Symphony. It deserves that because it is what it is. It isn't an improvisation vehicle. With Bobby, I heard an interview where he said he's always heard the Grateful Dead as a symphony in his head. And maybe it is a legacy thing, Do those songs deserve that? Yes. I feel like the, Eyes of the World deserves to have a symphony playing along where they add a sliding part of Terrapin. To have all those violins at once doing that, like on the album? Yeah, I love it.
And last question, Edward, did your dad sing every lyric of Terrapin to you?
No, because not to throw my dad under a bus, I don't think he knows all the words to them. But
that's what I was
like
wondering.
he would definitely sing the Terrapin Station part. Past Lady with the Fan.
Really, really cool. Edward and Paul have 3-song finals. Whoever has the lowest aggregate score over the 3 songs wins the prize pack of taper shirts from Relix. Let's hear Kevin's first pick of the finals. really just bopping, dancing in the street at Milwaukee Auditorium in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on February 4th, 1978. Kev, why that dancing?
76 and 77 overshadows 78 generally. But dancing, I feel like that was its golden age. Even better than, the real early ones, than the 80s ones that just almost seemed like an afterthought. Like, hey, we're in Nostalgic, let's play dancing.
So you're a 78 truther?
Yes, the whole Close Encounters thing. If you listen to that whole tour, Jerry trying to find it the whole time is really neat. For me at this point, it's a matter of finding the gems as opposed to looking at things as a whole. And 77, I guess, I feel like has always been pushed in my face. And I want to look at what else is out there. Some of the 79 is okay, even though Keith was apparently nodding out at the keyboard.
So you're looking for gems, moments, tracks, shows, all the above?
Yeah, tracks. I very seldom listen to a whole show. I just do not have the attention span. I can't even make it through a movie anymore. My attention span since COVID is shot. I'm on to the next thing. So I'll pick out songs. Like someone's like, oh, it's a great Scarlet Fire. All right, I'll go find that show and listen to the Scarlet Fire. And if something catches my eye, I might move on further, but
You obviously listen to a lot of Fish. You recap every show after it concludes. Are they the exception to that?
no, I only listen to Fish when I listen to them live. I never go back. Well, we do that Wook Club thing now, but no, yeah. I read a quote that Fripp said once. I guess I don't care if people want to record me, but why would you want to listen to something you've already heard? I mean, I could spend my whole day listening to new releases of emails from people I get that we have a new release, our artist has this coming out. It's a different world. Remember back? You probably don't remember. Back in the day, you used to have like $15, right? So you went down to the record store and you either bought the new AC/DC or the new Judas Priest. And from that moment on, you were team AC/DC or team Judas Priest. Now they both put out an album. I can listen to them back to back on YouTube and not have to spend a penny, and I'm not invested in it anymore.
Art being inconvenient to access increases the enjoyment.
Yes.
Thanks, Kevin. Paul got it exactly 78. Nice pull, Paul. Edward, 76. Paul, how'd you diagnose 78 there?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit fast. Great pick also, by the way, Kev. Great pick. I love that song. A little bit speedy. You can hear two drummers, and you can tell by the quality of the recording and the tone of the band, the whole band. And then so I'm jamming, I'm listening to clarity, everything. I'm like, it's not going to be 77. That would be too easy. So let's go 78. And that was it.
Playing the game.
Listen, and Mike, I got to tell you, you have people on this show that are so smart with the Grateful and so much information that I feel like an idiot. I'm just back here as like a casual hanging out fan that I like to listen to the Grateful Dead jam. And you got guys tell me about Jerry's guitar. That was, I don't know. The information that people know on this show is unbelievable to me. It's crazy.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I am in awe of everyone who comes on, including you, and you're up 2 points in the finals, so you're doing something right. Edward, 76.
I'm embarrassed, to be frank. I had spoken earlier about how Bob Weir's tone is so apparent and so different every year. And that was definitely 100% a 1978 guitar tone from Bobby. And I think it must have just been nerves, because same thing, playing the game, right? It can't be 77. And hearing Keith's tone, it sounded smooth, and I think that's what threw me off. It made me think it was 76, because 76 all around just feels like very smooth and laid back.
Paul goes up by 2 in the finals. Before we move on to the next song, though, Paul, how'd you get into the Dead?
Kind of same as everybody else, I guess. I grew up listening to like hard rock, and then teenage years got into like hardcore punk, like death metal, like just the most extreme metal you could possibly listen to. And then like my late teens, you start experimenting and like doing, stuff that teenagers do. And then I found, the Grateful Dead, their imagery is iconic. My parents are both classic rock fans and stuff like that. I'm 38. My parents are in their 60s. So they were part of that generation. So it was just always around me. And I thought that, the skull and roses and the steel, everything looks cool. It's a skull. It's cool, right? So I'll check it out. But when I was a kid, and Edward, I feel bad for you, man. I feel like I'm the last generation pre-internet. I grew up with no internet. I have to go to my friend's house to see if they were home and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, anyway. So the point of the story is that, like, I didn't know about Live Dead, really. There was no Spotify. There was nothing. It was just record stores. And so if I had 15, 20 bucks, that money's important to you when you're a kid, right? So I would get the album I want, like the heavy metal album. So I'm not risking it on like a Grateful Dead thing. But when Napster came around, that was a total game changer because now I could check out stuff for free, right? And so I don't even remember what year or whatever it was, but I downloaded some weird Grateful Dead live set thing. Took forever. It was like 4 hours long, and then I'm putting it on. I'm listening to it, and I hear Scarlet Fire for the first time, and I was just like, "This is nuts! This is like the coolest jam." Because I've been playing music my whole life with my brother, and we just jam. That's all we would do when we were young. We didn't know how to play any music. We would just make noise and like noodle around, and like we'd get a groove going and be like, "This is cool." Just play that shit for like 3 hours until my mother screamed at us. So to hear like the Grateful Dead do it on like a actually professional, fantastic, great level is like the light bulb goes on. You're like, this is it. I found the thing. And then in my 20s, I got back into like metal. I was like, Grateful Dead, it's all for, whatever. But then in my 30s, I picked it back up again and I found Relisten, the app Relisten. And that was like every day, listen to a new show. It's like the greatest thing ever. So that's it.
The ease of access that's kind of shifted you along the way. So
Access and information, right? Because I never had anybody to lead me. Like no one my age listened to the Grateful Dead, and like my mom and dad kind of were like, they were like aloof about it. I also really didn't know what to ask. I would never went up to my dad and like, hey, what's the best live show you ever heard? You know what I mean? Because they saw shows, Live English Town. And then once I found it, the gold mine of live tape is, now I can go deep dive and doing my own research and find out all the cool stuff that I like. That's why I'm a fan now.
not a lot of 38-year-olds have come on this show. That's a specific age that seems like you kind of were in that down period during the Dead, because now Dead and Company's so big, it makes total sense that Edward listens to them.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like, absolutely.
There are 2 songs left in the finals. Let's hear Kev's next pick. All right, the guesses are in. That was Feel Like a Stranger at State Fairgrounds in Lewiston, Maine. Shout out, Paul. Sorry, just missed it. On September 6th, 1980, it was taped by Knack Dragon. Kevin, tell us about that pick.
Stranger, those early versions all have an extra 2 or 3 minutes in them that kind of disappeared over time. But it was one of the first songs I heard of theirs that spoke to me. When like a deeper level, I was 12, 13, whatever. I had gotten Go to Heaven out of the library, and it just, the misfit power, I'm running a red light, it pretty much informed my whole life, that and Jim Morrison at that point.
What about that freewheeling lifestyle appealed to you at the time?
I lived at home with my mother and I was 12.
Got it.
It seemed like a better way. I picked Stranger. I felt like it would be easier because it has to be after a certain time. You pick any show from 80, it's pretty much is going to have a Stranger, an Althea, and a Lost Sailor in Saint of Circumstance somewhere in it, but they were in love at that time. They were their new toys.
Stranger got shorter. The jam got shorter as the years went on, and it seems like that bummed you out. Are there any songs that got shorter and you're like, good, that's the length it should be?
No.
Okay.
No, I know, because it used to frustrate me that even though you got 4 songs out of space, it was still only 20 minutes. I much rather would have had 2 10-minute songs instead of 4 5-minute songs.
Edward nailed it, 1980. Paul guessed 1990. So Edward takes an 8-point lead going to the last song.
Whoa.
Edward, that is a mighty pull.
I got whiplash.
Tell us about it.
This one, the entire thing that made it was Brent. Like Brent's moog that he'd do on Alabama Getaway off the Go to Heaven album, like that was fully present and fully there in this cut. And like I have a long history with this album. Like Go to Heaven was, for a brief 6-month period, was my favorite Dead album. Fully shameless about that. Rag on me as much as you want.
What did it go back to after the 6-month period?
It went back to, everyone loves, Working Man and American Beauty. But since then, I've come to really have a deep appreciation for In the Dark. Take it for what it is. It's the MTV album. But it has a lot of very solid hits, like, not just Touch of Grey, not just, Hell in a Bucket, but, the When Push Comes to Shove is probably the closest studio cut to live stuff that you hear out of the Dead since the 60s. Just, to me, the whole thing is just an incredibly solid album. Except for Tons of Steel, but Tons of Steel is Tons of Steel.
Oh, come on, man. It is their best recorded album out of their whole catalog. I completely agree with you. Because they went into an empty arena and recorded the album. They got up on
live
stage
in the
and
dark.
played the songs to nobody. Touch of Grey was a hell of a hot little tune, and it did what it was supposed to do. It made a band huge. It was as simple as that. People are like, what happened to the Dead? They sold out? No, they had a hit song. They didn't change. The world came to them. It was a Muhammad in the Mountain thing with them,
Does anyone have any love for Built to Last?
Yes. Yeah, all those Brent tunes, I was a Brent head. I was 16, 17, 18 when Brent was playing, so he was my voice. He was the closest thing to a happening dude in the band. The rest of them were old geezers that you probably really shouldn't trust. But then you had Brent up there, and he did what, Little Light and Blow Away, and
I love Brent's verse and Let the Good Times Roll too. Okay, Paul, 1990.
Yeah, sometimes you just catch a bad one. You know what I mean? No, man, that sounded too crisp to be 80. I mean, I was like, and no vocals again. Keyboards were hard for me, man. I got to tell you, I thought I heard a friggin' saxophone in there. I thought, and I was like, oh, the Marsalis show was like, what is that, 90, 91, something like that? I forget.
There's one each year, 90 and 91.
Well, that's why I picked 90, because I remember when he did that show. I love that Eyes of the World. That's like one of my favorite eyes. It's so good, so smooth, man. I know it's like real kind of like maybe like barbershop jazz-ish, but it's fit. I love it, dude. I don't care.
for off the cuff, hey, I'm gonna come and play this song with you. All right, the chords are this.
And he rips it. So I just blew it. What are you gonna do?
It's a hard game. Before we hear Kev's last pick, Kev, how did you get into the Dead?
When I was very young, my mother used to take me shopping with her all the time, and 98 Rock used to play Casey Jones, and they would play it over the record company, and I'd walk around going, flying that plane. I didn't know the words. I just made stuff up. I went to the library to find the song, so I checked out Go to Heaven, and I checked out What a Long Strange Trip It's Been. Neither one of them have that song on it, but I discovered this whole thing, and I was like, okay, and so I kept looking. One day in the mall, they had Dead Ahead on at the big screen store. And I stood there for an hour and a half and watched the Grateful Dead while all my friends were hanging out in the mall. And I never looked back. But it was all albums though. That was the thing. I didn't get a tape until I was 16. So I had been listening to them for a good 4 or 5 years before I even got a tape.
And then you went in straight into all tapes after that?
Pretty much, yeah, because you had to be cool. You couldn't listen to the albums. You had live tapes, you know. Yeah, you thought you were such a rebel with the Grateful Dead. I'm listening to the Grateful Dead, but then you went and saw the Grateful Dead, and there were 80,000 other people who looked just like you. So you weren't really being that much of a rebel. You were more just finding your people, you know.
So when did Fish start catching your eye?
The first time I saw Fish, a friend of mine, a guy I knew in biology class, I don't even know how much of a friend he was. He was like, an Allman Brothers cover band is playing. You want to go see them with me? And I was like, sure. We go down there. They're like $7. It's some band called Fish. So we begrudgingly pay our $7. We go in and we see them. And after the third song, he left and went to the bar across the street called Lush's just to drink. And I hung out, and I got on that bus, and he never did. When Fish broke up in 2000, I got into this band called the Radiators. That's why I'm Radiator9987 on Twitter. And for years, a good 12 years, I went and saw them, and they were my thing. And the keyboard player said, I don't want to die with my boots on, and just broke the band up in like 2013 or something like that. And I was like, now what do I do? Oh, Fish is still hanging out. I had kids too. You have kids, you have that whole thing. I only saw Fish at Merriweather in 3.0 because I lived 15 minutes from there. So I could make an excuse to have somebody watch the kids, go to the show, come home, and only be gone 4 or 5 hours.
Well, as I've said, I love Wook Plus. I throw it on habitually, and I especially love your recaps of Dead & Company performances.
The Dead & Co. we fell into, we never planned one, and then we were like, well, I know a little bit about it, and T was like, I know a little bit about it, and we were like, let's roll with it. And a lot of shows. Very interesting, though. It gave me a whole new appreciation for the whole conglomeration, because I would poo-poo on it at times. Just because, you're like, John Mayer, come on, what are you doing? Further was cool, again, being the cool guy. You got to, but then you discover John Mayer. John Mayer, to me, was the best bearer of Garcia that we've ever had. When he did an estimated, it was the 77 Mutron. When he did a Stranger, it sounded like a Go to Heaven era, because he learned it from the studio stuff more than the live. And I feel like his appreciation and his reverence for Garcia is up there with anybody who's ever done it.
I happen to agree. Kev, how did Wook Plus get started? It feels very organic. Authentic is a word we use on the show to describe the Grateful Dead, and that applies to Wook Plus too. It feels like just friends hanging out, but just really knowledgeable friends. How did it get started?
Well, Wook Plus itself was, in 2019, Tim put out a tweet, does anybody want to collaborate on anything? He's Weekend Wook. And I responded. A couple months later, we started doing stuff, and then COVID hit. And they started doing dinner and a movie, and we were having 3-4 hour meetings a day just because we were all stuck in our houses. So we drink beer and just do this. And we were like, we should do this live before dinner and a movie, and we haven't looked back. That show was called The Lot. We got like Tom Marshall to come on because nobody had anything to do. We're like, Tom Marshall, you want to come on The Lot? And we get him on there, and I'm like, where would you rank Fuego with Fish's albums? And they're all like, dude, you can't ask Tom Marshall to rank albums. And he was like, no, I have no problem ranking albums for you.
Kevin, thank you so much for doing it. I'm really excited to hear your last pick.
Only love can feel.
The guesses are in. Comes a Time at MSG on September 16th, 1991. Kev, yeah, tell us about that one.
It was the song that I chased for many years because they would play it once a tour, once a year, maybe from 86 on, from when he came back. It didn't show up much. And first time I ever cried at a rock and roll concert. I just stood there staring at the band, and it was pre-drums, which is even more fascinating to me because Comes a Time lived after Space for the most part in the last 15 years, you know.
Do you subscribe to the mythology of MSG?
I saw them there twice and it didn't impress me, but this was in 1991, so it looks a lot different now. My favorite place to see a concert, and I know people poo-poo on this place a lot, is Merriweather Post Pavilion. Since 1985, I've seen hundreds of shows there, and it always sounds good. The cops are asses. They've built a city around it. When I first used to go there, in 8th grade, there was something called the Renaissance Festival, which they still do in Maryland, but it used to be in Symphony Woods around Merriweather because there was nothing there. It was Merriweather, and so they've kind of ruined it. But yeah, that's my spot. MSG is just, I think it's a place that has this pedigree and this mythology built around it that maybe makes it greater than it really is.
Refreshing take. Paul was closer. He guessed 89 because Edward guessed 87, but Edward still wins on aggregate. Congrats, Ed, the new champ of Guess the Year. He went through Gavin and both Pauls. Great run by you.
Thank your dad, Ed. Tell your dad thank you.
I will, absolutely.
And show him the Relix magazines.
Yeah. But Paul, you're closer, 89. Tell us what you heard.
Hey, Kev, thanks for putting a little vocals in there right at the beginning, bud. Help me out. No, you could tell Jerry was a little bit older there, a little raggedy. The keys, they had that magic in the late 80s. And so I could tell that was late 80s, early 90s. I just couldn't nail the actual year down.
Fair enough. And yeah, I'm guessing, Edward, you didn't hear Bruce in there either.
I did not, or maybe I heard too much Bruce and not enough Vince, because I definitely heard the tinkly keys, as they say Brent had. And I knew that I had a feeling it was MSG. Just, man, 91, that's crazy year. Like, it's the most consistently inconsistent year, in my opinion.
Such a pain to get tickets. It was like, all right, no, Brent died. Now it's another thing. We have to go see them because this is it. And they kept bringing more people on, and then they were writing new songs, and they were like encouraging this growth. And I was just like, stop. You know, you've become the cop in the parking lot. All of a sudden, you know, everything you were against, you've become at this moment.
In what respect?
Well, I mean, you know, sending out the flyers, you know, look what happened at Deer Creek. I think you increase the presence of the police. You encourage people to react to that and do dumb stuff like tear the fence down at Deer Creek. I think it breeds that. I think Phish has been brilliant at not doing that. They can sell out their places, you know, but it's never hard to get a ticket.
It's just that post-Brent funk that the Dead were in those last 5 years. Like, I think there's definitely some standouts. Like that summer tour, like the Giant Stadium stuff that they did that year was just phenomenal. The stuff that they've been putting in the movie theaters. Like the summer tour was really good, but I just feel that like once they got into like enclosed spaces, like, you know, like MSG, for example, like things sort of, they lost like that summer high, right? And we're just sort of going off of fumes. Like that's when Jerry was kicking back into his drug habit. And
he didn't want to do it either. He was forced. They had the whole ecosystem they were supporting, right, Edward? I mean, it was.
Yeah, you read his books. They all say it. They started something they couldn't stop.
And like, you know, that they wanted to stop, right? But because they figured that since the hiatus, they left so many people without jobs during the hiatus, they figured we can't do that to people anymore. So
if we give Garcia another 10 years, he probably wouldn't be alive now, but he would have lived another 10 years if in 90 they had to said, all right, Brent died, let's take a break for a year. And the Reckless didn't help with bringing in Vince, who was an incredibly great guy from everything I've heard, but he liked doing drugs, and Jerry was like, cool, somebody new to do drugs with, you know? Jeff Clemente is the longest tenured keyboard player for Bob Weir. He's played longer than every other keyboard player combined in the Dead. I love that guy. Love that guy.
Kevin, thank you so much for curating. Beautiful
Thank
picks.
you, man. It was so fun. This was great.
Paul, excellent run. Nice work. Thank you so much for
Congrats,
coming
Ed,
on.
man. Good job, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you
Nailed
so
it.
much.
Edward.
Great playing with you.
Yeah, you're 19-year-old force here on Guest of the Year. You ran the gauntlet. Congratulations. Thanks again to Kevin for curating this week's episode. Congrats to Edward on the win and Gavin on his really long run. 3 games, nothing to sneeze at. Congrats, dude. Thank you again to Kevin. His show is Wook Plus. It's on YouTube. The link is in the show notes. Thank you again to this week's prize pack provider, Relix, which again introduced a Tapers section collection. It's really, really cool. It's worth checking out. It has the exact same spirit as this show. If you like the show, you're probably going to like these shirts. You can go to relixmarketplace.com to own your own tangible slice of music history. There's got apparel, sticker collection. Again, supplies is limited. These things will run out, so check it out when you have a moment. For all the show links, including our YouTube channel, go to guestoftheyear.net. And if you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guestoftheyear.net. Shout out to Dylan for drawing the poster and James and Jack for helping out behind the scenes. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing Tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congratulations to Edward. And to our other contestants, thanks for playing. And remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.